We're going to be learning the Sikha, look at the Sikhas. That's for Chelik Tazayan for Parashas Parah, because this Shabbos is Shabbos Parashas Parah, which means that for Maftir, in the Kriyas HaTorah, we read the beginning of Parashas Chukas talks about the mitzvah of Parah Aduma. Before we get to the Sikha, I want to read the posting, one of the psukim that says in Parashas Chukas, the Negei Parah Aduma, and because later on in the Sikha, this will be Negeya, so I'm going to read the posting right away. After the posuk says that you have to take this Parah Aduma, the red Parah, and add certain things to it, and then you burn it. Then the posuk says like this: "Va'osaf ish toyer es efer ha'parah." A toyer person, a clean person, should take the ashes of the Parah. V'yiniach mechutz lamachna b'makom toyer. He should put it outside of the camp in a clean place. V'hoisel adas b'nei Yisrael lemishmeres. It should be for the Jewish community as a keeping, as a safekeeping or keeping lemishmeres. Lemei nido, for water that you sprinkle, chatosi, this is called chatos. And Rashi explains here that there are three things here that in the posuk. The Shleisha Chalok, I'm going to read the Rashi, even though the Rebbe doesn't read the Rashi, but just to get the idea of the Parah Aduma. They divided it, Rashi says, in three parts when they made the Parah Aduma. One they put in Haramishcha, one they gave to all the Mishmores to use, and one they put in the area by the Beis Hamikdash, which is called the Chel. And Rashi says like this: the one for the Mishmores that was outside of the Azorah, outside of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, that all the people from wherever city they are and they ever needed it, because this was used for sprinkling on a person who became Tomei through a dead body. So this was one part of it that they just gave for people to use. The one that's in Haramishcha, the Kehanim G'deilim used to use that if they ever had to make another Parah Aduma. They had to be Mekadesh themselves with this Parah that was put over there. And the one that was put in the area called Chel, that's called Lemishmeres. When the Pasuk says it should be Lemishmeres means for a keeping, for a safekeeping. There's a Gzeiras HaKos of the Torah said that you should put away one chelik, a little bit of the Parah Aduma, every time you made a Parah Aduma in the Chel. And that's the word where the Pasuk says, V'hoisel ladas b'nei Yisrael lemishmeres, for a mishmeres. We're going to see later in the Sikha that this word is also used for another thing, another part of what we're saying here, but I read this posuk, so you should be familiar with this posuk. Now we'll get to the Sikha. Steht in Yerushalmi, it says in Yerushalmi, the dinyahu, that really it would make sense, shetagnem achedesh leporah, that first we should have the kriya of Shabbos Parshas Achedesh, the kriya of Parshas Achedesh, and then to have the kriya of Parshas Parah. Why? Shebe'echad b'nisan hukum HaMishkan, because when they put up the Mishkan was put up on the Chedesh Nisan. And when it talks in the Parsha, in Hachedesh, it talks about the putting up of the Mishkan. Ubesheni, the second day of Nisan, Nisrava Parah. That's when they burned the Parah, they made the Parah Aduma. So therefore, in order, it should have been first Parsha Hachedesh, which talks about the putting up of the Mishkan, and then, which was on the Chedesh, and then the next Shabbos should be the Parah Aduma, which came after. Lama Parah Kedemes, why is Taka Parah Aduma first? Because there it talks about the Tara, the purity of all the Eden. It means like this: a freer length of Parashat Parah, that the reason we read Parashat Parah first, Lahazeres Yisrael Latayr, to warn, to tell the Eden that they should become Toyer. Why should they become Toyer specifically now? So they should make the Korban Pesach with Tara. So therefore, first we read Parashas Parah, and then Parashas Achedesh is shown Parashas Pesach. In Parashas Achedesh it talks about the Korban Pesach. So first you have to be Toyer in order to bring a Korban Pesach. So therefore, even though mitzad the chronological order first should have been Parashas Achedesh, then Parashas Parah, but because in order to have Hachedesh, which talks about the Korban Pesach, you have to have the Tara from the Parah. So we read first Parashas Parah, and then we read the Shabbos later. We read Parashas Achedesh. So the Rebbe says like this: from Loshen Yerushalmi, from the words of the Yerushalmi, Sheitarosan shall call Yisrael. It says that Parah Aduma is read first because that talks about the Tara of all the Eden. Is Muchach, it proves that the Tara from Parah Aduma is Negei Tzal Eden. That the Tara, the purity that comes from the Parah Aduma, is important for all the Eden. Azay zech moving from the Teichel Inyan dort. We also understand it from the context of the Inyan. And what Mesaken Gunam is a Leib in Parashat Parah, that when the Chachamim were Mesaken to read Parshas Parah with the Takonos HaKriyas for all Eden, who reads the Torah? Who's the mitzvah of hearing the Torah and the Parsha? All the Eden. So it's freer from Parshas Achedesh. So they made Parshas Parah to read before Parshas Achedesh. Choshas b'dinu shtagam Achedesh Parah, even though Pesachel it should be the opposite because of the order. And the reason why we read Parshas Parah first, mitzad dem tam she Parah shehi the Parah taros and shekol Yisrael Parah tar of all the Yidden. And whom are we saying this for? For all the Yidden who have to hear Kriyas HaTorah. And we're saying the reason why Parah comes first because that is the tar of all the Yidden. So it means like the tar of all the Yidden. Because like this, you would think maybe it means that some people have to have the Parah Aduma before they bring the Korban Pesach because they have to become Torah. But here it's not mashma like that. Here it's mashma that it's a tar of all the Yidden. Inside the Loshen, Kol Yisrael, that's Taros and Shekol Yisrael. And also, that's the reason why all the Yidden read Parshas Parah before Parshas Achedesh. So the Rebbe asks, but he doesn't say the Loshen Stam, you need it's not understood. He said, that this needs an extra biur, and we have to make it gishmakir to understand, which basically is trying to say it's not a real kasha he's going to ask, but it definitely requires, because of the kasha he's going to ask, requires an extra explanation. What's the question? This that you have to become toyer from being tomed by touching a dead body before you bring the Korban Pesach is negeya nor tzudi v'zanet meyames. This din is only for those people who are tomed. People who became tomed for your mess, they have to have a Parah Aduma before in order to bring the Korban Pesach, because if they're tomed mess, they can't bring the Korban Pesach, so they have to have the Parah Aduma first. But need to call Yisrael. That's not for all the Yidden. For all the Yidden. All the Yidden have to have the Tara from the Parah Aduma. Only those who are tomed have to have. Father Rabbi. It's more. But on the contrary, when Rev Yidden are not meyames, the din is if most of the Yidden are tomei mes, which means tomei through a dead body, darf man nicht onkommen zu Parah b'tarasen shel Yisrael, as he shall can bring the Korban Pesach. Actually, then you don't have to have them all toyer. Weil a tzibur bring them Korban Pesach ich betume. If the whole community or most of the community is tomei mes, they bring the Korban Pesach while they're tomei. So you don't even use the Parah Aduma. So the Parah Aduma is only used if there is a minority that's tomei. So therefore the question is, why do all the Yidden, which everything goes after the majority, not the minority? And the minority, if anything, it's the minority that's tomei, not the majority. So why do all the Yidden have to magdim sein Kriyas Parshas Parah, have to read first Parshas Parah, Farah Chedesh, before Parshas Achedesh, mitzadevos the Rosh Shekol Yisrael, because it's the tar of all the Yidden. Unit Achedesh free far Parah, not Achedesh before Parah, because that's the way it's supposed to be. So really, it's supposed to be that the Chedesh comes first. The only reason is not because it's the tar of all the Yidden, but it's not the tar of all the Yidden. It's the tar of some Yidden. So why is it that all the Yidden, and we say the Loshen is Taros and Shekol Yisrael, have to read Parshas Parah first? We have to say the deeper understanding. This that it says that Parah is the Tara, the purity of all the Yidden, nicht nur the Tara kipshuti from Tumas Mes Pashtas. Doesn't mean Pasha that Parah Aduma, it talks about the Tara Pashat when a Yid is Tomei, kipshute, he has to bring the Parah Aduma, because then it would not be for all the Yidden. So it must mean nor azat Tara was Kol Yisrael daf non kumitzir. It represents, it means such a Tara that all the Yidden needed. In was for a matzah nor zayin, whatever situation they are. Und das dafke great zu zebinyan von Achedesh Pesach. And dafke reading Parshas Parah, all the Yidden that day is their preparation to Parshas Achedesh, where it also talks about the Korban Pesach. So we must say that there is something more in the reading of Parshas Parah, the Yidden of Parah Aduma, than just this is the representation of Yidden becoming Toher in order to bring the Korban Pesach, because that would be only for people who are Tomei. Let me das verstehen by Hagdim. So Rebbe says we'll understand it by first bringing in a gefind achidish in the mitzvah of Parah Aduma. We find something special, something different in the mitzvah of Parah Aduma that we don't find in other places. The Rambam sagt in Sefer HaMitzvah, the Rambam says in his Sefer HaMitzvah, and the mitzvah of Parah Aduma is, the mitzvah of Parah Aduma is like this. You have to listen to the words. Last is Parah Aduma, make a Parah Aduma, kedei, in order. So the ashes should be ready for the one that needs it, the taras tumas mes, in order to clean you from a tumas mes. What does that mean, the way the Rambam says it? It means like this. At the Tachlis HaMitzvah, Bashtet, the purpose of the mitzvah is nit nor in nutznem efer b'shas hatzera. Not only that you should use the ashes of the Parah Aduma when you need it. When a Yid wird Tomei Mes, und darf haben die Tare Afro. When a Yid becomes Tomei from a dead body, and now you have to become Toyer to the Efer. That's not what the Rambam says. No, der Efer HaPorah darf sein milechatchila great for jeden, was wird es darfen. Part of the mitzvah is that the ashes of the Parah Aduma has to be always ready. For what? For people to use it. As to jeder Zeit, was a Yid wird sich nötigen in der Tare, at any time a Yid will need this purity, so the bald can sich mit Tare sein mit Efer HaPorah, you should be able to right away make yourself toy with Efer HaPorah. Which means, really the Rambam could have said, the mitzvah of Efer HaPorah is to sprinkle the ashes on anybody who needs it. That would be. The Rambam adds a few words. He says, the mitzvah is to have it ready, always ready, that whenever a person needs it, he'll use it. It's a different word. It's not just the word, the mitzvah is to sprinkle. When obviously, if you need to have it to sprinkle, it must be ready. That's obvious. But the mitzvah is to sprinkle. The Rambam says the mitzvah of the Parah Aduma is to have it ready always. When the Rambam brings the Ruf and Posik, and he brings the Posik that I mentioned in the beginning, where the Posik says, "V'hoiso ladas bnei Yisrael l'mishmeres," that this should be for the Jewish community for a keeping. But the Pirish Aposhet is the simple pshat. What does it mean to keep it, to have the Parah, the Efer Parah for a keeping, for a, whatever, also touch mishmeres. Der Efer Parah darf sein great mishuma for jeden von der das bnei Yisrael. That the Efer Parah has to be ready for all the Yidden, Kol Yisrael. Maybe he'll need it. In other words, it has to be ready for every person. In case any person will need it, should be. So being ready for every person is part of the mitzvah, and that's for every Yid. Because we don't know who's going to use it. So the mitzvah is, it should be ready for Klal Yisrael. The chidush in them is noch mehr. So this is a chidush, that there's such a mitzvah that this has to be always ready. But the chidush is even bigger. If I tome mess in the toke chiv that I says, if someone is tome, became tome by coming in contact with a dead body, there is no obligation, certainly with the Raisa not, that he should become toyer. A person, if he wants to stay tome, he could be tome. The only time where it says only one that can't become tome to a mess, and if he's tome, he has to become toyer as a kayan. But a person could become tome and stay tome. There's no mitzvah with the Raisa that he should become toyer. The only time it could be is, it says that the person has to become toyer before Yontif. So the Rebbe says, I feel like even before Yontif, as his daughter Chiv, there's an obligation to make it toyer for the Yontif. Is as in them is the Ashakavatari to the Raisa to the Rabbanon. First of all, there's a whole discussion in the Sforim whether this is a din midiraisa or a din midirabbanon. But besides that, the schal nor of them was his mechuyev aliyah l'regel. It's not for every Yid. Only if you have to go up to Yerushalayim for Yontif. La'fuki, to exclude under it. There are some people that don't have this obligation. So for them, there is no chiyuv. Even this chiyuv of becoming toyer before Yontif doesn't apply to them. No much ledugma, for instance. Then was hot in Karkab Eretz Yisrael. It says that somebody who doesn't own land in Eretz Yisrael doesn't have a mitzvah of going up to Yerushalayim for Yontif. Or that there was gefinzich chutzlar, so someone who lives outside of Eretz Yisrael doesn't have an obligation to go. So he's potter from Aliyah, from Korban Pesach. He's potter, he's exempt from going up to Yerushalayim for Yontif. He's exempt from the Korban Pesach. He also doesn't have an obligation to make Torah. So there is no essential obligation to become Torah at any time. A whole year, certainly not. But even before Yontif, it's only for some people. Kumtuis that comes out, Ados was a Efer Poro, Darv Zay Mezuma Lemishin, Starachelov, the Taras Tumas Mes, that the Efer Poro, the ashes of the Poro, has to be ready for anybody who needs it in order to become Torah for Tumas Mes. He says, Nit Dafke Pareina, but the Taram at the Mos is by Machil. So it's not only for somebody who must become Torah. It's even for one that the fact that he wants to become Torah is his own will. He wants to become Torah because it's good to be Torah, but it doesn't have to. And for him, we want the Torah says, let the Efer Porah be ready for him too. When he will decide willingly to become Torah, even for him, the Porah Adum has to be ready. As he should be able to come Torah right away when he wants. So it's another strange thing. Not only the mere fact that it's a mitzvah to have it ready, it's having it ready for people not even mechuyev to become Torah. So that's a strange thing we find, according to the Rambam, by the Parah Aduma. But the Rebbe is going to continue that not only the Rambam says that, but it comes out like that from the Psad Gaon. And the reason the Rebbe makes a whole discussion here about what the Psad Gaon holds, because there are some people, some Meforshim that learn Pshat in the words of the Psad Gaon differently. And the Rebbe is going to show us that the Psad Gaon says exactly what the Rambam says, that there is an obligation that the Parah Aduma, the Efer Parah, should always be ready for anybody who needs. There's a special din that has to be ready, not only telling us that when you need to use it, has to be ready. What do we see? How do we see it in the Psad Gaon? So the Rebbe quotes the Psad Gaon, he'll explain what others say, and he's going to show that the Pshat is different. Der Inyan is echt mutgish in Loshen Psad Gaon in sein Sefer HaMitzvahs. This that we said Pshat in Rambam is also stressed in the Loshen, in the words of Psad Gaon in his Sefer HaMitzvahs. He also wrote a Sefer HaMitzvahs, where he writes like this, as the mitzvah from Parah Aduma is, Uporo lemishmeres b'toider. The Parah has to be lemishmeres for a keeping constantly. As an Efer Parah darf sein great, but ständig. That the ashes of the Parah have to be constantly there. In other words, there's a mitzvah, not only when you need it, you should use it. There's a mitzvah that should always be there. Now, the Rebbe is going to say that the Pshat in the Psad Gaon is like he said in the Rambam, that there's a mitzvah that this should be always ready for people in need. Now, as I know, there are others, Meforshim Achreinim, was will Madai Zay Paloshin of Psad Gaon, that they want to Madai in the words of the Psad Gaon, where he says, Uporo lemishmeres b'toider, that the Parah has to be lemishmeres constantly. They say as their main their meat need them. It's not referring to that part of the Parah, Efer part of the ashes that was used to sprinkle on the people who became Tomei Mes. Nor the Cheluk Efer was Nisim B'Chel, but that refers to that third part, which we read in the beginning from Rashi in Chumash, that it was divided into three parts. One was in the given to all the Yidden, one was in the Haramishcha, and one was B'Chel, put in a special area in the Beis Hamikdash, just laying the Exeris, they didn't use it at all. And as I said in Rashi, that which words of the Pasuk refer to that part that had to be put away just in the Chel. So Rashi says it comes from the word Lemishmeres, the word that we're talking about now. Rashi says that Zesha B'Chel Nosen Lemishmeres D'Gzeres HaKosov Shenemer V'Oilat Tel Mishmeres. So some Meforshim, some Achreinim want to say that when the Psad Gaon says that the Parah has to be Lemishmeres, that refers to that part that had to be put away and always laying there. While Das gave them Cheluk Efer, they claim only on this part of the ashes was Neisam B'Chel that you put in the Chel, Shtei the Loshen of Hoysel Adaz B'nei Yisrael L'Mishmeres. The posting where it says it should be L'Mishmeres or Adaz B'nei Yisrael refers, as we learned in Rashi before, refers to that third part that's put B'Chel. V'Loshen Arasag Upora L'Mishmeres, and the Psad Gaon says that the Efer Parah has to be put away L'Mishmeres. So obviously he's referring to the Loshen of the posting that V'Hoysel Adaz B'nei Yisrael L'Mishmeres. And that part of the pasuk refers to the one that was put away, not the one that was used. The Chazal learn up from them. The Chazal learn out from that pasuk. Amedar behalt not tell from the mefer from yeder for the mishmeres and chil. That every time they made a Parah Aduma, they had to take a part and put it away, just for safekeeping, not to use. Put it away in the chil. So they say that's what the Psad Gaon meant when he says Parah has to be the mishmeres. But according to that would come out. As mitzvahs Parah Aduma bechlolos is the Pidas Rambam in them Cheluk Efer. So the mitzvah, it seems like according to this, that the mitzvah where the Torah says what Parah Aduma is the Mishmeres mainly refers to this part which they didn't even use, the part that was put away in the Chel. But die can man sagen, as der Iker vetachlas a mitzvah is not in dem Cheluk Efer was menutz lotaras tmei mesim. How can we say that the purpose of this mitzvah of making the Parah Aduma is not to be, the main mitzvah is to be used for people who are tomei and to sprinkle on them. But in the Cheluk Efer was bleib behalten mishmeres. That the main part of the mitzvah is the part that is put away, not even used. That's hard to say. So they have an answer. So I didn't say mazbir. So these achreidim explain. Late this is mashma bekam mekemes. It seems from different places. I'm a flekneme from them Efer was gelegen bechel, that from this bottle or whatever it is that of the ashes that was laying for safekeeping in the chel, they used it to mazazayin at the Kein Godel Pariyim Kippurim. It says the Kein Godel before Yom Kippur for 7 days had to be put aside, that they couldn't be home, had to be in the Beis Hamikdash, and they would sprinkle on him from the Parah Aduma. So they used, some Meforshim say, from the part that was put away b'chel, that's the one they used for the Kohen Gadol. Well, when the Kohen Gadol, let's say they're going to naya paraduma. Also, when the Kohen Gadol, anytime they had to make a new paraduma, they would have to sprinkle on the Kohen who did it from the Efer Parah, they would sprinkle from that. So it comes out that it was used. So even though it was put away b'chel, just like Seiras HaKosuf, and the kasha we asked, how could you say that the ikar of the mitzvah is the part that they didn't even use? So they say they did use it. This we know was used for the Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur. And this is ikar mitzvah from paraduma. So according to those shotim, according to Rabbi Gon, when he says that the main mitzvah is that it should be the mishmeres, the teder, constantly the mishmeres refers to that part that was put away, and that's the main part of the mitzvah. Because that was a chiyuv. They had to sprinkle on the Kohen Gadol or on the Kohen who made the paraduma the next one. But by Yisraelim, and I feel like because by regular Yisraelim, and even by ordinary Kohanim, is talking chiyuv as a zeh al tziyochet muslim simultaneous. There's no chiyuv that they have to become toyer. I said before, a Kohen is not allowed to become tomei, but when he's tomei, there's no obligation. He has to become toyer. He can't become tomei again. He can't touch another body again. But there's no obligation. That's he should become toyer. Dafka Kohen Gadol, only a Kohen Gadol. Was nor can't turn the Aveda for Yom Kippurim. He's the only one that could do the Aveda on Yom Kippur. He's a mechuyev azos ha'efer for Yom Kippur. So he is obligated that they should sprinkle on him the ashes of the Parah Aduma. So it comes out from this as hechlech mitzvosef and Efer Parah, that when must someone use the Efer Parah? When must the Parah Aduma or the Efer Parah be used? The Chelik Efer is not b'chel mishmeres. It's only obligated because the other part, there was nobody basically who had to become Toyer. So there's no real reason that they had to use the Efer Parah. Only once they had to use the Efer Parah and before Yom Kippur and the Kohen Gadol. And that was taken from the Chayil. That's what the Tzaddik Gaon means when he says that the Parah Aduma was, they're supposed to be the Mishmeres for a constant. But the Pirish and Divrei Tzaddik Gaon is Tzorichi and Gadol. Rebbe says it's very hard. Tzorichi and Gadol needs a lot of thought. The way they learn is very hard to understand. Why? Warum? Why? So he says like this: Neisev of them as a Pirish now zayin divert the Parah Mishmer B'Teida. Besides the fact that according to that, when the Tzaddik Gaon says these words, Parah leMishmeres B'Teida, that the Parah was for a Mishmeres, for a safekeeping constantly. So those words are blaze asim etzavisim welchen chelik ha'efer is mitzvasim machrachas. It's only telling you a sign which part of the Parah Aduma of the Efer Parah was an obligation to be used. These words don't tell you what the meaning of the mitzvah is. It tells you have to put it away. And it's talking about the one you put away b'chel. Why is that the one that the mitzvah is all about? Because that one has to be used, must be used sometime, which is before Yom Kippur. So the teichen of the mitzvah is that it has to be used by the Kohen Gadol. This is just a sign which we're talking about. That it seems like here that the Tzaddik Gaon is trying to describe what is the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to put it away. Why is the mitzvah to put away? Because you need to use it for the Kohen Gadol. So he should have said mitzvah paradum is to be used by the Kohen Gadol. But this is just a similar which of the Efer Parah is being used. So that's hard to understand. From the mitzvah filun dem chelik, it need us for the Efer mishmeres that even this part that we're saying that the mitzvah is to sprinkle on the Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur. So that has nothing to do with the fact that there has to be the mishmeres. Nor in the azoye ala Kohen Gadol. The meaning of the mitzvah is that it has to be sprinkled on the Kohen Gadol. What is not eating with chaykas, and even that is very seldom. Etlach more for Yom Kippur. That will be a few times, twice, not twice, a few days before Yom Kippur. So it's a few times, and Yom Kippur is only Achaz Vashana once a year. And also, if they ever make a new Parah Aduma, they have to use this also. How many more Parah Adumas did they make? Was Meis Moshe Rabbeinu that's given place Achmal from Moshe Rabbeinu's time till now was 8 times only in these thousands of years. So that's something very seldom. So that's number one. To say that Tzaddik meant the Parah Mishmeres that goes on that little bit in the Chel is hard to say because that doesn't describe the mitzvah. That just tells you which you have to use. But the mitzvah was to use it for the Kohen Gadol. That he doesn't say. But besides that, how could you say that this is the only time that they had to use? There was mechuyev obligated to use the paraduma. There's a mitzvah on the Kohanim and all the Kohanim to do the Aveda in the Beis Mikdash every day. And when der Yochid tut es, is mekayim the mitzvah. And when the Kayan Gadol individual does it, he's Mekayim, does the mitzvah of doing the Aveda. Well, Kayanim is name. And the Kayanim were very careful in mitzvahs, and they did the Aveda. When Hoyerotz into the Aveda, Mesiras Nefesh, they ran to do the Aveda. They went to a Mesiras Nefesh, they got hurt sometimes. The Kayanim ran to do the Aveda. The Mele is the Tara from Parah Duba, Nin Nachrochi Razei. So the fact that they have to become Torah is a must. The whole thing that they're saying is there's no other time of the year that you must use the Parah Duma, only for the Kohen Gadol, and that was from the Chayil, the one they put away in the Chayil. The Rebbe says, what do you mean? There was other times that they had to use it, and they must use it. You had to do the Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash. So any Kohen, and people became Tomei, so they had to use it. And the Kohanim wanted to do the Aveda. So if they were Tomei, they definitely would want to do the Aveda, so therefore, they had to use the Parah Duma. Why would the main mitzvah of Parah Duma be in that part that you put away in the chayil? They only sprinkle on the Kohen Gadol. So it's hard to say this is that the Psadik Goren, when he says the mitzvah is the mishmeres tedor, refers to that little bit that they put away the mishmeres, as the pasuk used the lashon that it should be the mishmeres in the chayil. The father mistaber lema, that's what makes more sense. It's as other and contrary. Kavadas Psadik Goren mit Parah the mishmeres tod tedor. When he says that the Parah Duma is to be lemishmeres for safekeeping constantly, is kedivri Rambam now. That the Psadik means like the Rambam. Azike mitzvah Parah, the main mitzvah is as the Eifer Parah was ständig great, that the ashes of the Parah should always be ready. Lemisha yestara chelov letaras tumasmes. Whoever will need it to become Torah tumasmes, and that's what he means. The mishmeres b'teita should always be ready. But the problem, obviously, is he's using the word lemishmeres for this. And if you look at the posik and the way the Chazal say, the word mishmeres refers to that third part, the third part that was put away in the chayil. So the Rebbe says, you can kasha nit from them, as the Rebbe go and use them loshon mishmeres. It's no kasha why he uses the word mishmeres, was like vidroshas Chazal, where the mid gemein the chayil ka'efra nit mechayil. Canal. That according to the Chazal, the way they darshan and where Rashi brings down, that refers to the part of the chayil. And he uses the word mishmeres, so probably he's talking about that. Rebbe says, noraya. Was ein kavoni in them loshon is nit up vidroshas Chazal. When he uses the word mishmeres, it doesn't mean the way the Chazal dash the word of the posik, nor the pshuta shel mikro. He is the way the poshet of pshat and posik, not according to the drash of the Chazal. As v'hoisol adas b'nei Yisrael mishmeres main, simple pshat and posik, when the posik says that this should be for the Jewish community, the mishmeres main eich or the gorbike means also, and maybe that's the main meaning. The klolo sefer was meant to have halten kreiten which is starachelo. When the posik says it should be the mishmeres be'emes in pshat, Chazal have their ways of learning la halacha, but in pshat means it should be kept. What should it be kept for? The mishmeres. Mishmeres for what? It should always be ready to be used. So it's definitely included in simple pshat that the regular for Parah to be used for other people. And the Rabbi even says maybe that's according to simple pshat. Maybe that's even the ikef pshat, that it should be the mishmeres means should always be ready. Especially when it's Rambam says it should be the mishmeres. For whenever someone will need it, includes Taka the Kohen Gadol too, because he Taka needs it also. Which is muchach from them, and the Rebbe proves it. But the Rambam brings the Raya of the Minyan, the Rambam, who definitely says it means that it should always be ready to be used. So the Raya, the proof the Rambam brings, as the mitzvah from Parah Duma, from Mezumah, that the mitzvah of Parah Duma is that the ashes should be ready. From which pasuk does he bring it? From the pasuk, v'hoisol adas b'nei Yisrael mishmeres. He brings this pasuk, which the Chazal darshan on this pasuk. It means the third part that went to the chayil, but the Rambam uses it for his thing. So we see from the Rambam also that it's possible to use this word l'mishmeres and not mean what the Chazal said. It goes only on that part. Is nichlal in v'hoisol l'mishmeres, because also according to the Rambam, that part of the Eifer Parah that was used to sprinkle on people is also included in the words Hoisel Mishmeres. Mezumah l'mishri mitzarachel, if it's ready, should be ready for people to use it. So b'meile, we could, so just like in Rambam, it says in the word l'mishmeres, and he quotes actually not only the word, he quotes the whole piece, those few words of the pasuk, and he means not that part, he means the one that's used. So the Psadia Goen means that too. So what we came to now to a conclusion is that Sai according to the Rambam, Sai according to Psadia Goen, Teichen of the mitzvah of making the ashes is not only that you sprinkle it when you need to sprinkle it. It has to be ready. Part of it has to be ready. That's the mitzvah. It should be laying ready that in case you need it, you should be able to use it. But what you do have to understand is, why is the ashes of Parah so negeya? So much that we stress, as I says, it's not enough that we should have it when you need it. It has to, the mitzvah is it should be ready. So while it's ready, not being see. Normally we think, when are you fulfilling the mitzvah of Parah Adumah? Someone is stomach, you sprinkle on him, oh, now you're doing the mitzvah. What about the time when no one is stomach, no one needs it at the moment? Then the mitzvah of Parah Adumah is not being done. According to what we said before, it's not true. The fact that it's laying ready is the mitzvah. But the question is why? Why is there a mitzvah to lay there? Mitzvah is to have it. Obviously, if you need to have it, the only way you could have it if it's laying around. True. But that's not part of the mitzvah, but the Rambam says it is. And so there's a beside you going. So now the Rebbe is going to explain it. Everything in Gashmi comes as a ishtalshlis from the same meaning beruchnis. Also. But certainly, the Torah mitzvahs, considered Torah mitzvahs, the details of every mitzvah begashmius, all the details of the mitzvah, the way it's in the physical way, is a shtalshelet, comes parallel to the way this fulfillment of this mitzvah, the mitzvah beruchnis, what the mitzvah means beruchnis. And actually brings now to 27. Zayah says, "Istakal beraisa bar alma." The Eibush looks into the Torah and he created the world. So Rebbe said that's really what it means. That the world came from Torah, the way it's in the Ruchnias. And he quotes the Shalom and the other that say, the Shalom writes that people think that the Torah talks about things down here, but it also hints to things in higher levels. But the truth is the opposite. It talks about higher levels, and it also hints to things here. So the way the things are here, that shows us, that comes because that's the way it's in higher worlds, Baruchnis. The same thing here. Also, Mrs. Parah Adumah is beiten says, es muss sein afra mezumen, when you of this, that the way to fulfill the mitzvah is that you should have the ashes ready for when you need it. Nemtzich is their food. This it comes from, but the mitzvah of Parah Adumah bavei the ruchnis is an inyan was for the zuständig, is because Parah Adumah beruchnis means it's an inyan that is constantly needed. It has to be ready for everybody in his Avodas Hashem. So since, as we'll explain what it is, but since this is Beruchni, is something that every Yid needs, in other words, it always has to be ready. That's the inyan that every Yid has to do. So Begashmi is the mitzvah that should always be ready. And automatically, after we get the explanation what it is, it answers the shayla in the beginning. At the beginning of the Sikha, the Rebbe asks, why is Parah Adumah the Tara of Kol Yisrael, the Tara of all the Yidden? It's only for somebody who became Tomei. The answer is because Beruchni is the Tara of Kol Yisrael. It's something that every Yid must follow what Parah Adumah is. Beruchni, what is that? The beer and them, the explanation is like this. Parah Adumah is in Yonah Tshuva. Parah Adumah, what's the union of Parah Adumah? Doing Tshuva. And he explains why. Parah Adumah cleanses you from Tumas Mes. Let's understand what is Tumas Mes. And when we know what Tumas Mes is Beruchni is, we'll know what Parah Adumah, which cleanses from it, is Beruchni. Tumas Mes Beruchni is means the Tumah, the impurity of by contact of a dead body. Beruchni means das was durch Avedes vet avenesechem hoyim avdilim. It says like this: when you do Avedes, the pasuk says the Avedes separate the Yid from the Eibishter. If you're not connected to the Eibishter, you're separated. There's no life. The pasuk says, you are connected to Hashem and you are alive. That means if you're not connected to Hashem, you're not alive. That represents Misa. So since Averes are mavdir separate from the Eibishter, so Averes basically cause the concept of Misa. So Parah Adumah cleanses you from the connection to Misa. Parah Adumah, the inyan from Tshuva. Parah Adumah represents Tshuva. Because when we say Averes makes Misa, so how do you get rid of your Averes, which means cleansing you from the Misa? It's through Tshuva. That's Metaya, the Miden. This cleanses the Yid. Ties him back to his source, to his root, which is the Eibishter. So we know what Parah Adumah is. Parah Adumah is Tshuva, because you have to cleanse yourself from Tumas mes, and Misa is Avedas, because it's separation from Hashem. If you do Avedas, you get separated, and you don't have the Chaim. And Tshuva, and Paraduma is Tshuva. Okay, the Chazal say, Tove Parah Chapra Maisegel. One of the reasons for Paraduma, let the Parah, which is the cow, which is like a mother cow, come and forgive for the Aveda that he even did with the calf, with the Egel. That means Parah is Metayr Tumas Mes, it's always in Avenis, because Parah makes you clean from Tumas Mes, which comes out from Avedas. So that has to do with the Chet Egel. Every Aveda a person does comes from the Chet Egel. The root for all Avedas after Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, the roots for all Avedas was the Chet Exadas. The other Medicine did. But then by Matan Torah, that was wiped out, that was over. After Matan Torah, through the Chet Egel, they brought Avedas back, and from then on, every Aveda has to do with the Chet Egel. So when the Chazal say that the Parah Aduma is there to forgive for the Chet Egel, that means to forgive for all Avedas. How do you forgive for Avedas? Obviously, your Tshuva. And since Parah Aduma forgives for Avedas, makes you cleanses you from the concept of mess that represents Tshuva. But also the beard of them was in Parah Aduma, in Parah Aduma, you find two extreme things, two opposite extremes. From the one side, is Kolas Yosef B'chutz. On one hand, when they made the Parah Aduma, it had to be outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Chutz l'sholosh machnas, outside of 3 camps. Not like regular karbonis. Where do you bring karbonis? Inside the Beis Hamikdash. This was outside. So it's not like a korban. Le'idoch, on the other hand, one of the things they had to do was spritz when they made the Parah Aduma. It had to be done outside, but it had to be facing the front of the Eyal Meir. That means, as the Chazal say, miskaven, he has to intend. When he sprinkles the blood, which is part of the process when you make the Parah Aduma, he has to look and face the opening of the Heichal of the Beis Hamikdash. But if the whole thing is done outside, why do we need it that he has to do it towards the Pnim, towards the inside? Because since we said that Parah Aduma represents Tshuva, in Tshuva we find these two opposite extremes. The rooftop from Tshuva is what's the union of Tshuva? It forgives you for things that you did outside. Outside means not Kedusha. Das was is chutz l'kol hamachnas, l'kedusha. Outside, when we say the Parah Aduma is done outside of all the camps, which means Machna Shechina, Machna Yehudi, Machna Yisrael, that means outside of Kedusha. Because Parah Aduma is tackling the Avedas, which is outside of Kedusha. It forgives a person even for Avedas that the person did intentionally. If you do an Aveda that comes from the real klipa, there is klipa snega, which is a klipa which has some Kedusha in it. That's many things which are neutral. They're not holy, but they're not bad. Avedas is bad. So Avedas is chutz. That's the end of Gimel Klipas Atmeis Gamre. Nit vistam korban zayin mechaper plays of shkoges. A regular korban, only forgives when you have to bring a korban, only if you do Aveda b'shegig, which means unintentionally. So Parah Aduma is worse. Is mechaper for worse than that. When the keach to ken mechaper zayin of zdeinis, the keach that the Parah Aduma is able to forgive even for Avedas b'mezid, which is chutz l'chol hamachnas, represents when you're outside of the machnas of Kedusha, nemtzi von hamokim elyon pnim b'yesed, comes from very high madrege. That's why it has to be facing the inside, because it comes from the real the keach to forgive even for Avedas b'mezid comes from the real inside, the depth of Kedusha. And where do we see that comes such Hashem madrege? Which means, since it represents tshuva, and tshuva reaches such a high madrege, and that's what the Parah Aduma is. And the Rebbe is going to bring, where do we see that tshuva reaches such a high madrege? Because it says like this, and I'll say first the teich, and then I'll read inside. It says in the Medrash that the asked Chochmah of Deibish, the concept of Chochmah, if someone doesn't have Aveda, what should happen to him? So you know what Chochmah answered? Let him die. So then they asked the Torah. What does the Torah say? Torah says, let him bring a korban and forgive. Then they asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what should happen? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter answered, let him do tshuva. Which means, Dafke HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shalamayla Meteira, Dafke the Eibishter, which is beyond the Torah. He's the one that, it's his Torah, so he's higher. Zog the Mentvet. He gives the answer, and the advice and the commandment, Yasa tshuva v'yiskaper, let him do tshuva, forgive. Mashenken Teira mitzad atzma madrigos Teira in its own level is the Eitz Yovi Oshem. What's in Schapiro B'Shgoges? Teira says, oh, let him bring a korban Oshem. And what's wrong with that? Because an Oshem is a korban that forgives only for B'Shegeg. So from the Teira perspective on its own, only for Shegeg could forgive. The Rebbe does ask in the order 39, there's one Oshem that is also for amazing. It's called Asham Gezelis. But even there, you have to do tshuva. That's why he forgives. So, who's the one that said tshuva will forgive, even for mezid? It's the Eibishter. It comes from Haimadrege. So, the Rebbe shows how, because we explained that Parah Aduma represents tshuva, that's why we find the two inyonim that's in tshuva. One on tshuva is for a terrible thing outside of the machna of Kedusha, but it reaches a very, very high madrege inside. So the Parah Aduma was done that way. It was done outside of all the three machnas, but it had to be when they sprinkled the blood, facing the inside, the depth of inside of the heichal, because that's what tshuva does. It connects you to the high madrege, and the Eibusha forgives you. Kemen meinen, so you could think as der inyan tshuva is dafke fareina was parchota pogam povras ader. You could think that this concept of tshuva is only for somebody who sinned already. He went off the derech. Nor edavon kumt zu Parah nasis bechutz. He who happens to be in the level of outside. He's a terrible guy. He's outside of Kedusha. So he has to come onto the Parah Aduma, which is done outside in his place in order to bring him to do tshuva. If a person behaves properly, like the Pasuk says, the way the Eibishter made a person, he should go straight. So if a person goes b'derech hayosher, the straight way, Avedas HaTzadikim, he's a tzaddik, does everything right. What connection does he have to Parah Aduma? And this is all we said the whole time before. Everybody must have Parah Aduma. And the Rebbe started to answer why everybody has to have Parah Aduma. Because Parah Aduma, the way he says now, represents tshuva. But not everybody has to do tshuva. So we're back to the question. Even as much as we explained the Ruchnias, it's a high madrege and it's tshuva. So tshuva is like a very good, but it's only for people that have Averis. So how do we say it's for everybody? It's true. As we know that every person has to do tshuva. The Alter Rebbe is mavaya bekama mekemes. The Alter Rebbe explains in many places. A tshuva is not dafke for averes. Tshuva, normal tshuva is not only for averes. Even a tzaddik has to do tshuva. But so taka tzaddik has to also do tshuva. So the chura that comes back. So Parah Aduma is for everybody because Parah Aduma is tshuva and everyone has to do this. So the Rebbe says no. But when everyone has to do tshuva, even the tzaddik, it's not tshuva for averes. Not Avedas at tshuva. There's a certain Aveda called tshuva from the Ruach Toshav Elokim Hashem Asona. There's a pasuk that says that the spirit, this mission, the neshama should return from the word tshuva to Hashem. That means a yid always has to work on himself to make his neshama reach the connection to Hashem the way it was before, before it came down to this world. The that he should return, his neshama should come back and reach his source. These are Elokim Hashem Asona to reach the Eibishter who gave the neshama. So that's a different type of tshuva. That's not tshuva for doing averes. We're saying the Parah Aduma represents tshuva for doing averes because you see, Parah Aduma is outside of the machna because the person did averes is outside of the machna. But that has nothing to do with the person, the tzaddik. Even though we say he has to do tshuva, but it's a different type of tshuva. That's not tshuva for averes. What kind of connection does a tzaddik have to Parah Aduma, which is outside of the three machnas? He's not outside there. See, if a person does Averis, he's outside, so the Parah Aduma comes outside and schleps him and helps him to makes him to tshuva. But this person is not outside, so why do you need Parah Aduma? Zokman deruf, that's where the Rambam comes and says, the mitzvah from Parah Aduma afra mezuman lemishi tzarechelo. The Parah Aduma, the mitzvah is that the ashes should be ready, always ready for anybody who needs it. As darfliegen le mishmeres betei, that has to lay there for a mishmeres the lotion of the psadik gun, always. You always, every person has to have that union of tshuva, even the tshuva of Parah Aduma, the mishmeres beteder, always has to be. The Parah Aduma has to be by everybody. Ready means has to be ready for everybody. Because poshet pshat, it says al tamin ba'atzmacha. Don't believe in yourself. You always have to be ready to do simple tshuva because you never could be sure with yourself that you're not going to do Avedas. The frat like in klal, especially according to the rule, there's a posuk that says There's no tzaddik in the world that only does good and doesn't sin. Now, leyechta means it doesn't sin. That's one thing. But there's another type. Yechta means missing. The word yechta also means missing. Some taket tzaddikim don't sin, but even they are missing something. Al kaponu chet meloshen chesoren. The word chet from the lotion of missing. As felt, it could be missing. That there's nobody that did everything 100% as much as he could. It said the Rebbe uses the lotion the boy lemievet as it says in Ksubas. And even if a person does great Gemara, Ksubas says it like a person who was very rich and he gave a lot of tzedakah, and nevertheless, something happened. The Gemara asked if he gave so much tzedakah, why did that happen? And the Gemara said he gave, but he didn't do as much as he could. For so rich, he could have done more. And the Gemara says that was bad. So there's no tzaddik that you can't say he's not missing. Or the Rakapon Nid B'Shleim is not that he's missing, but it's not complete. So even that tzaddik has to do tshuva, not just to try to make his neshama toshuv to come back, that type of tshuva. First, tshuva for something that's not good, not bad, but something that's not complete. Now, feel about Vayim is in ganz nitokin, and even if you're a person that has no sin whatsoever. If a person has no sin, why would a person die? The Gemara says, no one dies if you don't do an Avera. So he says, there's a possibility. And the fact that there is connected the union of death is shayches to everybody, even to him. He says, nor be'etesh shel nochash. That's only because of the nochash. The nochash is the snake, but the chet zadas. And by the chet zadas, the Eibush said that people will die, so that's why he died. So we do find a person, some people, very few, but some people, actually the Gemara says that there were a few people like that, that the only reason they died because of the nochash hakadmeni, because of chet zadas. So here we see there are people who l'chura don't need the Parah Aduma. Okay, you do a Pirush Arizal. You know what the Arizal said? This is something Arizal said when he made the Hesped on the Ramak. The Ramak was a big Mekubal. The Rebbe of the Arizal, when he passed away, the Arizal said a Hesped. And it was Pasha Kiseitze. So the Arizal said, on the Posek in Kiseitze, it says, if someone will die, and you don't, and the way he types the Posek says, when someone will die, which means he best killed him, you have to hang him on a tree. And that's the thing, you have to hang him for a moment. But he types like this. Hang it onto the tree, meaning, if there is a tzaddik and doesn't have an avera, but does his geira misa, which caused him to die, and you see that he did die, but didn't do an avera, so there was no reason for him to die. He's hang it onto the isadas. That from Bayim Taylor's and the minion and misa from chetek tzadas. You have to hang on, explain why he died because of the chetek tzadas. So you brought misa. So you have tzaddikim like that. So l'chura, you do have some people who don't need the Avedas HaTshuva. So the Rebbe says, no, is doch dos gufe was the Chet Eitzadas that him avirkan, this mere fact that the Chet Eitzadas even affected him, that shows that, yeah, there is some connection. Some type of connection to the Chet Eitzadas is there. So he has to do tshuva for that. So every yid has some level of tshuva in a simple sense because he's missing some, even the highest madrega. Besides the point that even the tzaddik, that his whole misa only comes because of the chet tzadas. So Mamela, he does show connection. The Rebbe says even more than that. You could say if he doesn't do tshuva to take care of that little connection he has to the tzadas, if he doesn't do that, who knows how he could go down lower and lower and go down lower from his madrega, become much worse. So for sure, every yid has to do tshuva. Certainly when there is chazal, especially when you start thinking, you contemplate on what the chazal say. This lashon, chazal Yerushalmi, kol day she'enei beis hamikdash nibna b'yom any generation, where the beis hamikdash is not rebuilt in your lifetime. Ma'il nolov kilahu echivei. So the Eibush considers it as if you destroyed it. So if you start thinking about that Maimer Chazal, that means that since Mashiach didn't come yet and the Beis Hamikdash is not built, so no matter how great a person could say on himself, he destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. That's what Yerushalmi says. That's on one side. Ulamal Yusuf, look at the other good side. There's a psak din that if an individual was also mitzvah achas, he did one mitzvah, he would tip the scale for himself and for the whole world to the good side. And he would have caused a salvation for the Eden. Mashiach would have come, the Beis Hamikdash would have been built. So on one hand is that you destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. That's what the Shalom says. If it wasn't built in your time, you destroyed it. On the other hand, you have a kayach to rebuild it. Because with one thing, sometimes you could rebuild it. And you look at himself and he says, well, but it didn't happen. The Beis Hamikdash is not rebuilt yet. Especially when we're in Golus, in a double darkness before Mashiach. So there is a chutz here. And basically it's everyone's fault. So this tzaddik's fault also. And it's chutz. It's the worst chutz. Nowadays it's worse than before. And we're not helped him. Mashiach didn't come. And it's possible that it depends on his Aveda. And as long as the Gula doesn't come, it's Rachman and Letzlan It's Rachman and Letzlan as if you are in the generation that destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Because it's not built, and you could have rebuilt it. Because your Maisa, had it been the right way, would have rebuilt it. That makes a person, brings out within the person simple tshuva, and in the strongest way. So here we see how the union of Parah Aduma, which represents tshuva, applies to Kol Yisrael. You still could think, great. The Mishmer is Beteda. True, that the Efer Parah, which represents tshuva, always has to be ready. You always have to be ready to tshuva, like the Sadiq Gon says, Mishmer is Beteda. But since I'm a straight person, I have to have it. But that shouldn't be my main Aveda. The main Aveda is whatever I do, good things. I also, as an addition, I also have to be ready for doing tshuva. And he thinks, why would a person think so? Well, since we're talking about a person who has nothing to do with the outside of the three machnes. And das, was darf haben die Tshuva from Parah Aduma, and this that we said that even he who's not outside in the chutz has to have the Tshuva of Parah Aduma, is das nicht a Sach, was hat given. As we said before, it could be it's not because it's your fault. Normally, and there's the nochosh, the snake, the chetei tzitaz, so it's not something that I chose. So, but still, as we said before, but you still got to do something about it, because after all, that chetei tzitaz did have an effect on you. But they're just talking about durch tshuva ton of them. So he knows he has to do tshuva because everybody has to do tshuva. Aber nicht machen davon, like you said, Davidos, but it shouldn't be fundamental in his Aveda. For them. He could think I'm higher than it, but I got to do it. I know because there's some part and some connection I have to something not so good. I have to do tshuva, but it doesn't have to be that this is my main Aveda. One of them. So we say to this as Parashas Parah is Arosan shall Kol Yisrael. The Tara that comes from the Parah, which is Parashas Parah, is the Tara of all the Yid. Jeder Yid of onkom to the Tara from Parah Aduma. Every Yid has to come out to that cleanliness of the Parah Aduma tshuva. By every Yid, this is the foundation of his whole Aveda. Since what he's going to do next is going to be the Parshas HaChedesh, and that includes the Korban Pesach also. And what is that? And we state it says in Medrash, as the Chukah from Parah Aduma is Gedela from Chukas HaPesach, that the Chukah means the law of Parah Aduma is greater than the law of the Korban Pesach. Why? Because those that eat the Korban Pesach need to come into Parah Aduma. What's Navei Ruchnis meant is, what does it mean the Ruchnis? Eichle HaPesach is Aveda Tzadikim. Those that ate the Korban Pesach represents the Aveda of Tzadikim. And when we say those that ate the Korban Pesach have to come out to Parah, and that's why Parah is greater, that means that even Tzadikim must come out to Parah Aduma, and that comes first. Eichle HaPesach tzrichen leParah, ki gam HaTzadikim tzrichen las tshuva. It's Namaim. That those that ate the Korban Pesach represent the Tzadikim, and they have to have the Parah because they also have to do tshuva. So here we see that this is important, and that's a yesod. When you are going to do your Aveda, which is represented in the Korban Pesach, you must have Parah before. So that answer, he said, maybe it's not a yesod. I have to do tshuva, fine, but not a yesod. Here we see it's a yesod. Even though you're a tzaddik, but the Parah Aduma must come before your Aveda from the Korban Pesach with the Parshas HaChedesh. Afil tzaddik, even a tzaddik. His dosva said is a yesh meshev. The fact that he's a tzaddik and he loves Hashem. So it says in Tanya, the fact that he loves Hashem is also shows that he's still a yesh, some kind of his own identity, something on himself. Yesh Mishayev. You say he loves Hashem. Who's the he? If you say I love Hashem, means there is an I. So that also shows in the Schapiro million. Besides that, he's also a yesh, even if I'm madrege. But look at another thing. Every Yid has free choice. Even the tzaddik has free choice, chas v'sholem, to do something against the Eibishter. Weiß er doch, as er is a Metzias, shows that he is some kind of Metzias, some kind of thing. He's not in ganze miyuchat mit der Kus. He's not completely united with the Eibishter. Kommt tu is, as die Avede von der tzaddik is in ihr allein gemischt der Metzias. So it comes out even not only chas v'sholem, the connection to the Itzadas. When the tzaddik serves Hashem, there's some kind of yeshus in it. He serves Hashem. He loves Hashem, so there is a he there. The far that tzaddik won't come into the tarif from Parah Aduma. So tzaddik also has to come out of the cleansing of the Parah Aduma, which means to to cleanse yourself of feeling your own being through the tnuah and tshuva, by doing tshuva. How does that take away you from feeling your metzias? The verbitterkeit of dem was is a metzias. His tshuva is like a tshuva, real tshuva, but he feels bad. He feels bitter. The fact that he's a metzias, that's what the tshuva in his case is. When the nicht in ganzen bottle zilikus, he starts thinking, I'm not completely bottle zilikus. He feels bad about it. And that's the tshuva. When dafke durch der Arbeit ist a tshuva. It's only through this tshuva. These leifnas, these mevatel sein metzias. In a way that it nullifies his metzias, can by him the noch sein echle apesa. Then he could come only when he has that foundation, even the tzaddik. Then he comes to the next level, to eat the korban pesach, which is the aveda. Na'efim pesach v'diluk, korban pesach tzaddikim, but it also has a meaning of passing over. Passing over means that you go to a much higher madrege. He says, you eat the pesach. Eating means it becomes part of you. You are what you eat. So this high aveda that the korban pesach represents becomes part of you, but only if you first did the Parah Aduma. The biggest tzaddik has to first have the Parah Aduma. That's so far what you say by tzaddik. Certainly, as es darf sein, der Aveda Tshuva from Parah Aduma by Beinanim. Certain people not tzaddikim, but Beinanim. You know, Tanya, we have talked about tzaddikim, Beinanim, and Rishoyim. So tzaddikim have to have the parsha of the Parah, which is the Tshuva. Certainly, the Beinanim. What's the difference at tzaddik and a Beinani? So it says in Tanya, tzaddik does kill this yitzhara, doesn't have yitzhara, doesn't even have a desire to do an aveda. A Beinani is not like that. A Beinani has a desire to do an aveda. He just never gives into that desire. But he does have a thought of maybe doing an aveda. But the bazei seine doher hure aveda, thoughts of aveda is there. It says in Tanya that the Beinani is a person never did an aveda. So even though he gets thoughts of an aveda, but the moment he realizes he has thoughts of an aveda, he pushes it away. But is aber das, was es fallen immer ein als solche Machshavas, the mere fact that such thoughts come into his mind, is aber weiß hat noch nicht mit keinem gönn the shvur tzaddik, shows that he still didn't fulfill the shvur before the neshama comes down to this world. They make, it says in the beginning of Tanya, the quotes of the Gemara, they make a person's neshama swear it'll be a tzaddik. Obviously, tzaddik means he doesn't have these thoughts, so he's not a tzaddik yet. Male therefore have done tshuva, he has to do tshuva. So a tzaddik has to do tshuva in his level. A beinani is a lower level, so he has to do tshuva in his level. The mere fact that I'm not a tzaddik yet, that's already enough. That's even a stronger tshuva. Alachas kama v'kama, certainly the design lamate madreges beinani, those that are lower than the beinani. He doesn't want to use the word v'shoyim, but those are also beinani. Now who is that? Now the way we learn Tanya, beinani is us. We hopefully we're not v'shoyim, chas v'sholem. We're not beinani either, because the beinani is a high madrege. But let's say, but even that, we are not even that. Even though it says in Tanya that Beinani is a level that every Yid should go strive to, and every Yid could reach that level. We know the heartseeker wunsch, the hearty, from the heart, the wish, halavai Beinani. We always halavai would be a Beinani. We don't want to use the word Rishoyim on ourselves, but we're definitely lower than the Beinani. Halavai would be Beinani. So darf sein tshuva taref chatoim kipshuton. So certainly, people lower than Beinani have to do tshuva poshet kipshuta for avedas chas v'sholem. In order to continue, be able to do avedas Hashem the way you're supposed to. Durch avedas tshuva the parshas Parah, and through doing tshuva as it's in parshas Parah, kommt and gleich to parshas Chodesh. Then we come straight to parshas Chodesh, which means the Shabbos after parshas Parah is right parshas Chodesh, because between parshas Zocher and parshas Parah there could be a hefsek. Then we have parshas Shkolim and parshas Zocher. But between parshas Parah, Parshas Chedesh, the klal is ein mafsikim beParah laChedesh. We don't separate. It means straight from Parah you come to Chedesh. Parshas Chedesh is in Yoni Chedesh Azalachem Chedesh Agula. It starts off with the pasuk Chedesh Azalachem, which talks about the Gula of Mitzrayim. And through that, Rabbi said Tshuva from Parsha Parah, and through doing Tshuva first, the Parsha Parah represents Tshuva. There becomes Umiyad Hein Golim. The Rambam says if you do Tshuva right away, you get redeemed. And on can have no separation, like we say here from Parshas Parah to Parshas Chedesh. And it Nisan Asidim Legoil, as it says that in Nisan the Yidden in the future will be redeemed, and that should happen because it mamish.
Amen.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi Schapiro.